We've all heard our stoner friends' boring explanations about how the final scene in Inception actually takes place inside the dream of a Care Bear, and how James Bond isn't just one man, but 3 separate antelope, all called Derek. But what about the more interesting fan theories? The ones that claim an Indiana Jones movie never happened, that Harry Potter is darker than it seems, and that the villain Jigsaw has a secret blockbuster movie backstory. Let's explore some of these more intriguing explanations right now in our list of the 10 strangest fan theories. Number 10. Toy Story 3 is a Holocaust movie. Is it possible that Disney actually signed off on a movie which depicted the murder of 6 million Jews through the tales of a talking cowboy, a slinky dog, and a Mr. Potato Head? Let's take a look and see if it holds up to scrutiny. Andy, leaving his toys behind for college, apparently represents the Allies abandoning the Jews as the Nazis conquered Europe. When the toys are sent in a box to Sunnyside Daycare, this is an allegory for Dachau concentration camp, complete with incinerator, might I add. And the claw that saves them is the Allies returning with their new life in Bonnie's hands representing the nation of Israel. Heck, they even talk about being stored safely in an attic for crying out loud. So could this possibly be true? And if so, does that make Lotso Huggenbear Adolf Hitler? Because just like the Nazi leader, he did make a small appearance in the previous installment. Number 9. The Rugrats weren't real. Of all the theories on this list, I think this one is the absolute coldest, as it believes that the Rugrats babies, Tommy, Chuckie, Phil, and Lil, were all dead from the beginning. The theory claims that the babies we see are merely part of Angelica's imagination, as after Chuckie and his mum died, Tommy was then stillborn, and Phil and Lil's parents had an abortion. But since Angelica couldn't know if it would be a boy or a girl, she created them both. That's why Stu is always in the basement making toys for his dead son. And that's why Chuckie's dad Chaz is a nervous wreck. This theory even covers the spin-off of All Grown Up, stating that Angelica briefly stopped imagining these dead kids for a while, until an incident with Tommy's brother Dill, who was the Rugrats' only real baby. When Dill wouldn't respond to her imaginations like the others did, she hit him so hard he suffered a hemorrhage and deformation. And Angelica's guilt over this caused her to start experimenting with hallucinogenics, which in turn brought the dead Rugrats babies back to life and eventually led to her untimely death, aged 13, from a drug overdose. However, what this theory doesn't explain is why Busta Rhymes played the voice of Reptar. Number 8. Casper is not what you think. In both the movies and the animation, Casper the Friendly Ghost is depicted as a kind, smiley little ghost with a face like a baby marshmallow. So why is it that everyone screams at the mere sight of him? Well, that may be because the image we see is how Casper sees himself. And in reality, those who meet Casper see something else entirely, i.e., the ghostly form of a rotting child's corpse. Number 7. James Bond's lack of kids. Considering how many women James Bond sleeps with, there are 3 things suspiciously absent from every one of his movies: herpes, sexual harassment lawsuits, and children. However, if you've read or watched the first installment in the Bond universe, Casino Royale, the last one may have been given a rather painful explanation. Remember the scene where Mads Mikkelsen's Le Chiffre whacks Bond in the balls repeatedly? Those balls are all shaken, stirred, and smashed into a pulp. And this messes old James up more than he lets on, which therefore explains why no matter who he sleeps with, whether it's Pussy Galore, Honey Rider, or Chumi, yes, that was her actual name, nobody ever comes to MI5 demanding child support because James Bond's gun is firing blanks. Number 6. Nuke the Fridge. I think we can all agree that watching Indiana Jones in the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull was more painful than getting your nuts smashed in, Le Chiffre style. So this next theory gives the whole world a helping hand and wipes most of that turd pile of a movie from the Indy universe. Remember when Indy gets into the fridge to avoid a nuclear bomb test? Well, everything terrible that happens afterwards, the commies, the aliens, and Shia LaBeouf, all of that is just Indiana Jones hallucinating as he's trapped inside a fridge riddled with radioactive material. Whew. Now the world feels clean again. Number 5. Willy Wonka was a psychopath. Isn't it kind of weird how all those kids end up severely injured inside Willy Wonka's chocolate factory, yet nobody questions it? And how the Oompa Loompas just happen to have a song ready for every child in every accident almost immediately? Either Wonka's staff take improv classes on the side, or Willy's a secret child murderer who's been mixing dead kids in with his candy. So why does Charlie survive? Well, obviously, Willy Wonka isn't going to live forever, and the vulnerable young Charlie is pretty impressionable. So clearly, he's being groomed to follow in Mr. Wonka's evil footsteps. And those dastardly Oompa Loompas? They just stand there singing and dancing as these horrors unfold in front of them.
Oompa Loompa doobity dooders, we are innocent. We are just following orders.
Number 4. Harry Potter is all a dream. Yep, pretty simple this one. Everything that happens in Hogwarts and beyond is just one big, elaborate fantasy dreamt up by Harry Potter as he spends his life wasting under the stares of his abusive aunt and uncle. This is a real thing which abuse sufferers actually do, called fantasy coping theory, and it explains why Harry is so good at everything, why Hermione is a mother-like figure, why he goes to the hospital so often with broken bones and head injuries, and why some aspects of the world seem to have been made up on the spot, as they represent the efforts of a much older Harry, struggling to make sense of his childhood fantasies, as he slowly rots to death in the cupboard he's always lived. Number 3. The Simpsons is all a dream. In episode 18 of The Simpsons Season 4, Bart puts a can of Duff beer in a paint shaker, and the resulting explosion takes the roof off the house as Homer is knocked into a coma. The rest of the episode is one of those lazy-ass clip shows that nobody likes, as the Simpsons gather round Homer to relive old memories. But some believe that he never left this coma, and that the following 24 years of increasingly unfunny adventures have been all dreamt up by Homer Simpson's vegetable brain. That's why nobody ever ages, that's why his antics get crazier and crazier, and all those celebrity camos come from Bart, Lisa, Marge, and Maggie talking about current events as they sit by their comatose father's ever-withering body. Number 2. The Future Flintstones. Ever wonder why the Flintstones used prehistoric versions of modern technology? Why would a bunch of cavemen make a car out of a rock, a movie theater, also out of rock, and a camera out of a bird trapped inside a box pecking even more rock? Well, this can be explained by the fact that the Flintstones is actually set in the future, not the past, after a devastating nuclear holocaust reduced Earth back to a primitive society. This is evidenced by the fact that Fred walks upright, not slumped over like our ancestors. That the show was made in the 1960s when fears over nuclear war were heightened. And it's even mentioned in the actual theme tune, with the Flintstones described as a modern Stone Age family. Great! Now, all we gotta explain is what Betty and Wilma are doing with men like Barney and Fred, because those stone-cold foxes could do so much better. And number 1, from Kevin to Killer. In Home Alone, 8-year-old Kevin McCallister is accidentally left behind to fend off burglars as his family takes a vacation. In Home Alone 2, a now 9-year-old Kevin accidentally boards a plane to New York instead of Florida with the rest of his family, and once more must fend off the same 2 burglars. And in Home Alone 3, nobody knows what happened because that movie doesn't have Macaulay Culkin in it and therefore doesn't count. But has there been a real third Home Alone movie under our noses the whole time? And indeed, a 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th? Yes, there has. And they're called the Saw movies. The theory goes that Kevin's horrific experiences in dealing with burglars from such a young age twisted his mind. And having begun his life by doling out punishment to crooks and criminals using paint cans and hot doorknobs, he eventually amped up the cruelty to the levels we see in the Saw films. In both Home Alone and Saw, the traps are mostly activated by the victims. Fire is heavily involved, and Kevin even goes so far as to manipulate people using video and audio recordings. And finally, in the basement of Kevin's family home, we see this. Kevin McCallister is the Jigsaw. There can be no doubt. So that's our list. Have we ruined your favorite TV shows and movies for you? What a shame. You'll just have to watch our recent video on 7 absolutely absurd animal crimes instead.